Hello, everybody. It's Peter. Peter with an I, S-T-A-W-A-R-T.
And welcome to segment 40 of...
I don't know, the Dark Tower, I guess?
What can I do for you? Asked the dentist. Joe felt sheepish and knew the dentist would shake his head with shame and loathing over his decision to drop the program. I think I'm gonna quit the class, said Joe, ready to present a speech about why. Okay, nodded the dentist, without the sickening pity and loathing Joe had expected. Do you have somewhere to be? A job or something while this class is being held? Well, no, not. Joe was going to give him the excuse he had dreamt up hours beforehand, but the dentist was quick to ask, then if I give you some money, would you mind running to Mac Daddy Burger to get me something to eat? It's just a little ways down the street from the clinic. I'll be willing to pay you for your time. Joe was taken back. He took the money and waited for the dentist to scribble out an order. Joe was expecting to be coerced into sticking with it to the end. But no. In fact, the dentist knew that Joe wasn't into learning, and was frustrated he was taking up space in that classroom. This was the first time Joe was faced with the fact that he had matured past the time when people would be motivated for him, when he would have to find motivation from within. But he had none. He walked down the hallway, pigeon-toed, with his hands in his pockets, head down. The subject for that day's discussion was genetics. The dentist started off with a little history of genetics. Farmers had been practicing genetics for thousands of years, selectively breeding different plants and breeding different animals to develop certain characteristics. But none of them before Mendel had ever tried crossing plants with animals. By fertilizing pea plants himself, he made strains of vegetable humans and human vegetables. The experiments got out of control when the giant vegetable humans started eating people.
Ooh, yummy!
Torch-bearing villagers had to burn his castle down.
Is there any questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Has anyone ever tried crossing an animal with a human? Asked Frank. If so, his next two questions were, was the product female, and does she have a boyfriend? Frank's infatuation with the cup was an exception, for Frank's undying lifelong fetish was what could be technically referred to as animal attraction. When he was flipping through the textbook and came to a picture of what a female Neanderthal might have looked like, he got a steel-hard boner that nearly ripped through the denim crotch of his pants. In response to Frank's question, the dentist told him he didn't want to get too far off on a tangent and waste class time. Sensitive school children would have ran out of the classroom, streaming with tears. But everyone in there, including Frank, was interested in the delivery of information, not etiquette.
Genes have a lot to do with expression, but there are also environmental factors that determine the physical features of plants and animals,
he explained. In plants, genes may code for a long, straight trunk, but if one tree were pruned annually, and its clone were left to grow, the two plants would look entirely different after a few years. In people, individuals who wear tight underwear have smaller hips than those who don't, because the fluidas are cut off from the pelvic region. Needless to say, this is fine for girls, but not for boys. It's difficult to tell how much of what we are is genetics, and how much is due to environmental conditions, continued the dentist. True, genes are important, but then again, there are some people who get along just fine without them. The only defects in people without genes is that they're never home, and when you call them, they never answer the phone. Chapter 37. Joe waited in line at the fast food restaurant, which wasn't fast at all. He didn't mind, because the place was surrounded with hoodlums who were waiting to rough up anyone who came in or out of the place. Their goal was to pressure the restaurant into kicking them off the premises, so that they could sue the wealthy franchise for violating their rights.
Guilty.
Mac Daddy Burger had deep pockets, and the gaping hole in those pockets was the courtroom. It had become a magnet for all sorts of lawsuits. Joe was the only one in line who didn't have a lawyer with him. Each took longer than it did 10 years ago, because during each transaction, the customer would try their hardest to get wronged in a way that would be profitable. The restaurant didn't mind going slower and serving less customers, because the more people they wronged, the more lawsuits they would have to deal with.
But in the picture, the cartoon character looks happy. I wasted valuable time and gas money driving all the way down here to be happy, and I'm not. That's false advertising,
said the old crone, demanding her rights. The kid behind the counter had heard the false advertising bit 100 times, but usually it had to do with the slogans or quotations they used on billboards or commercials. Down at the bottom, it says in fine print that anything said or depicted in the Mac Daddy tray mats applies only to participating Mac Daddy restaurants, he said in a monotone, and believe me, this was practiced. The lawyer whispered in the crone's ear, explaining her next move.
I can't read the fine print because my eyes are bad. That's being unfair to people with bad eyesight.
The kid behind the counter could have reminded the woman that she drove there and thus would need relatively good eyesight to operate an automobile, but such an argument would be for somebody who cared about justice. What they were concerned about was the legal system. The kid turned the tray mat over and showed her the large print on the back. Large print was added to the back after the company was sued for $38 million for unfairness against people with bad eyes. Joe made sure not to make eye contact with the hoodlums outside, who were yelling and making obscene gestures through the windows, waiting for somebody to come out so they could pummel them. They were all familiar with the law, and all knew better than to use certain swear words. If they used certain swear words that had been labeled fighting words by the Supreme Court, the restaurant would have a legal right to make them leave, and they wouldn't have a case. One of the lawyers who waited in line with her client kept a close eye on her watch, because as soon as a certain amount of time had passed without their being served, their client could sue on the grounds that the Mac Daddy Company didn't warn them that they would be waiting in line for an extended period of time, and that irreparable damage was caused to their joints, and no amount of money could compensate for the pain they would have to live with for the rest of their shortened lives. If they were successful, the client could win about $50 million, 25 of which would go to the lawyer, and $20 million would be paid in taxes to pay for government services like the court system. And a board would be sent to each Mac Daddy restaurant, warning people that customers may have to wait for a while to order. Finally, Joe stepped up to the counter. "How you doing?" he said. The kid running the till grunted a little laugh. "What do you want?" he sneered. Recently, there had been a law passed that customer service employees no longer have to be polite to customers. It was brought about because when young ladies would be polite to dirty old men, they would get the wrong impression and think that the ladies were attracted to them, and it would make for an awful situation. The justice system, which was blind, couldn't make a law exclusive to young beautiful ladies, so in the end, Joe was treated rudely, and it was within the rules. Joe ignored it and made the order. The clerk wasn't typing anything on the till.